Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to COVE. I'm Sherry Scully, the Executive Director of the COVE Workforce Initiative. And on behalf of COVE and OTCNS, our co-sponsor for today's event, I'd like to welcome you all to our fourth panel discussion in our Changing Tides panel series. Today, I'm joined by 6 guests who will talk about their experiences in recruiting and retaining newcomers to Canada and international talent in our national ocean industry. I'll introduce my guests in just a moment, but first a little housekeeping. We have over 100 people online with us today, and we encourage you all to participate in the conversation by sending your comments and questions via the chat function. I have several team members working in the background who will help to curate your comments and your questions in real time and interject them into the conversation. And this will be a conversation today. There's no presentations, just some good questions to get the discussion started and to keep us focused. We'll be recording this session, and the YouTube link will be available later this week if you'd like to revisit or share the Changing Tides event. The area of focus for this fourth panel is on the challenge of recruiting or retaining international HQPs, or highly qualified persons, along with the challenge that many newcomers to Canada experience in finding relevant points of entry into our blue economy. And with this focus in mind, I've invited 6 guests to today's panel to share different perspectives and expertise on this challenge and to share ideas on how their organization is engaging international talent. So joining me today, we have Jennifer L'Esperance, who has worked in the Nova Scotia government for more than 10 years. She's worked with Nova Scotia Office of Immigration as the Director of Strategic Policy and External Relations, and is currently the Director of Programs, which includes the Province Nominee Program and Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program and Settlement. Also joining us is Ulaş, who is originally from Manisa Province in the west coast of Turkey. Ulaş completed his BSc and Master's in Science degrees in Electronics and Communications Engineering at universities in Turkey. He studied his PhD degree in the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering here in Canada at McMaster University. Ulaş is the founder and CEO of Maricoms Inc., a company that specializes in broadband underwater acoustic communication systems. Also joining us is Jordan Jakubowski. He's the Director of Human Resources at Irving Shipbuilding. Jordan possesses more than 15 years of experience in various HR roles in both the private and public sectors. Since joining Irving Shipbuilding in 2018, he's held responsibility for all aspects of the human resource practice. James McKee is joining us from Ultra Electronics Maritime Systems, where he is the Director of HR. Prior to joining Ultramarine Systems, James worked for Nova Scotia Power, the Halifax International Airport Authority, MacTerra Limited, and the Canadian Armed Forces. He's worked in HR for over 20 years and is a graduate of Dalhousie University and the Nova Scotia Community College, Advanced Diploma in HR Management. And joining us today from Calgary is Brent Else, an associate professor in geography at the University of Calgary. Throughout his career, Brent has focused on research projects investigating greenhouse gas cycling and high latitude aquatic systems. He has now spent more than a year of his life in the Arctic, working on ships and in field camps, and traveling to Arctic communities in Canada, Greenland, and Norway. Brent is co-chair of the Canadian Ocean Acidification Community of Practice, and he's also the MEOPAR Deputy Theme Lead for Environmental Change. And we also have Andrea Baldwin, and Andrea is an associate partner in EY Law LLP, where she leads the business immigration practice in Atlantic Canada. Andrea works with clients to help them develop and implement strategies to bring international talent to Canada in a timely and compliant manner. Welcome, everyone. I'd like to start us off today with a first question to Ulaş. Ulaş, your background, including a PhD in electrical engineering, it certainly equipped you for success in the industry, working in underwater wireless communication. But becoming an entrepreneur and founding a successful company like yours also relies on networks to get your start. Who you know is often as important as what you know when you're trying to start a business, because your network can help to open doors to customers, to funding, and to other opportunities. And this can be a significant hurdle to newcomers to Canada or even newcomers to our region. Ulaş, could you please describe your career journey, how you went about building a network before and after coming to Canada, and what role that network played in helping you to establish your company?
Absolutely. First of all, hi to everybody. I'd like to answer your question by first mentioning that I think it's really important to have an awareness of what's happening around you, regardless of where you live in the world and what business you're in. So in my case, I first moved back to Canada in 2015 because after studying my PhD at McMaster, like you mentioned in the introduction, I left for Belgium to join the Catholic University of Leuven in 2008, where I was a postdoc researcher in the telecommunications group. And in 2015, an opportunity at Dalhousie University presented itself for a research professor position, and I was very happy to come back to Canada. But of course, when I joined Dal in 2015, I didn't really have any plans with respect to having a startup company and being an entrepreneur. But a series of events actually led to that point. So in Halifax, Nova Scotia, as you know, this is a very close community. Networking is important everywhere, but I think especially here in Halifax, Nova Scotia, and other closely knit communities, maybe even more important. And I can perhaps elaborate on this by giving a personal example. So in 2017, me and a couple of colleagues at Dal Electrical Engineering were working on organizing an academic conference here in Halifax, which was focused on underwater acoustics. So that conference brought a lot of experts from different parts in North America and the rest of the world together, including people from academia and industry. So that gave me an opportunity to have a very clear understanding of the lay of the land, what companies we have in Nova Scotia, in Atlantic region, and also gave me a chance to have in-person connections with those people as well as academics who joined the conference. So during that conference, I actually attended a talk, a scientific talk that was presented by one of the co-founders of Geospectrum Technologies. So I was impressed by the quality of his presentation. And at that time, I was actually trying to solve a scientific problem for my own project. And I was in pursuit of a company who could assist me by providing a technical partnership on the hardware development part. So luckily enough, I found what I was exactly looking for in that conference. And then I immediately connected with that person afterwards. And then 6 months from that, we ended up having a partnership agreement, which actually allowed me to start Mercoms in partnership with Geospectrum. So that, I believe, serves as a testament to the importance of being aware of what's going on around you and being always involved in conferences, organizations, and all other professional as well as social activities. And apart from that, I believe people can make a lot of meaningful connections when they meet in social setups, whether it be for a lunch event, for a dinner, for a couple of beers or whatsoever. So my personal experience suggests that it's a good idea to keep an eye on social or professional activities everywhere, because that eventually leads to very meaningful partnerships in your network.
That's great. Thank you, Rush. And I think you've really highlighted a challenge that we find right now with COVID around, having chances to meet people in person, really the value of those in-person meetings, and what we can do to better mimic those experiences for people. So thank you very much, Ulash. And I don't want today's conversation to be all about COVID, but certainly it's important for us to be thinking about COVID and what impact that's had on developing networks and helping newcomers to Canada to get engaged in the industry. I'd like to turn to Jordan now. One of the objectives of the National Shipbuilding Strategy, in addition, of course, to building a new fleet of modern ships, has been the cultivation of a new marine workforce. It extends beyond the shipyard to its supply chain and across the marine industry. And for many years now, Irving's been developing in-house talent, adding new apprentices, engineers and operations roles each year. But there's also a need for experienced mid-career and senior talent to provide leadership and that key transfer of knowledge to our domestic workers. And for that, I understand you've often had to look abroad to find some of the best talent in the industry. Can you describe what the talent search entails and some of the hurdles that you encounter in your competition for international talent? Oh, you're muted, Jordan.
Well, that was the most.
Welcome.
There, I think I'm good now. Can you hear?
Yep, you're good now.
Perfect. I was going to say good afternoon to everyone. And it was the most insightful thing I could probably say all afternoon, but I was on mute and I'll never be able to repeat it. So I'll have to go elsewhere. So, I think you're correct. When we look at our workforce, we're about 93% Canadian, but we've got that almost 7% that is international, and where we've had to look internationally to complement what we already have domestically. And there's no shortage of challenges when it comes to finding that talent. And I would say the number one challenge that we face is around the scarcity or availability of those individuals. So what we're looking for to complement our domestic workforce tends to be highly experienced, highly skilled individuals who have, a significant depth of experience in combat shipbuilding. And that's not something that we've done for decades here in Canada. And as a result, we do need to look internationally. And when we go out to the market to try to find individuals who meet our needs, the number one challenge is finding them. And in certain cases, you might be looking at a position or a skill set which already has a very limited number of people globally who are able to perform in that particular role with the years of experience that we require. So, for example, we recently hired an underwater warfare capability engineer. Not the type of skill set that we would normally have an abundance of here in Canada, and that you would normally have to go internationally to find. And that position was vacant for nearly 2 years as we went about that search. So for us, it's something that we really need to be forward-looking on in terms of finding the right people for us. In addition to that challenge, we're also challenged around the size of the market that we have. So you might only have a handful of people globally who can do the work, but also because of the nature of the work that we're doing, we also have a requirement from a security standpoint to have individuals cleared through the government of Canada and get the appropriate security clearances, which narrows our search to generally NATO countries, which allows us to ensure that those individuals can meet the appropriate security clearances. So we're really looking at a small market when we go out to find the talent that we're required to fill the vacancies that we have and to supplement that domestic workforce. So when we look at how we tackle that challenge, and something that we've been learning ourselves over the last number of years, we've partnered with several international recruitment agencies that specialize in the marine industry. So individuals who are out there already internationally working in the marine industry know about the different companies and availability of talent out there. We've also spent a lot of time building our brand. So working on our social media, working on our website, making sure that people understand who Irving Shipbuilding is and what opportunities we provide as a company, but also as a country and as a province and as a city here in Halifax to individuals who might be thinking about us for our careers. The other thing we've done is we've actually physically gone out many times and done recruitment visits. We've done career fairs. We've gone out and met individuals, talked to them about who we are and talked about what opportunities exist, and really tried to explain to them what they can expect moving here to Halifax. And I'd say the last thing that we've really done to help overcome those challenges is really dependent on the individuals that we have had success in joining our organization internationally, and use them as referrals to their own networks so that they can talk about the positive experiences they've had here in Canada with our organization to help us meet that challenge. And I just add a couple other things in addition to just really the difficulty in finding the individuals. Once you find them, then you need to really help explain or provide to them a compelling reason why this organization, working in Canada, working in Halifax is a good place to be. For many of these individuals, they'll be relocating thousands of kilometers away. We've hired many people from Australia, for example. That's a long trip to get home to see your family. So explaining what opportunities are here, all the opportunities and the employee value proposition that exists within Halifax, within Nova Scotia, is something that we've certainly spent a great deal of time focusing on. And a lot of individuals are really excited about the opportunity to be a part of a program this early on and to help build that up, and also to participate in mentoring and developing that next generation of shipbuilders is something that excites a lot of the candidates that we talk to. And I'd say the last thing I'll mention on this is the retention side of it. So once we do manage to find the right individuals, get the right fit, have them excited about joining Canada, it's about helping them settle in appropriately within the communities. So how do we work with them to do that? We've got a settlement team, one individual who's fully dedicated to meeting and working with all of our international hires to ensure that they have the right supports around relocation, the right supports around joining the community. They tailor an individual package for every family around their needs and desires, whether that's dance lessons for the child or helping spouses find alternate employment. They really work hard to make sure that our employees integrate into the community, find a network so that they can ultimately become part of the community and hopefully be here for the long term.
That's great. Thank you so much, Jordan. I think you really highlight a unique challenge that we have when we're talking, especially about HQPs and that senior talent around simply finding and locating that kind of talent. When we're talking about a handful of people around the world with that kind of expertise, it's pretty hard to get out there and find them with a traditional career fair. So, again, leveraging those networks to find the kind of talent that we're looking for is really important. Thank you very much.
Sherry.
Oh, yes. Hi, Andrea. Go ahead.
May I chime in and add a comment to? I think that Jordan's answer is really gold standard. We work with employers across the region who bring in international talent, and really to listen to the summary Jordan provided is amazing to hear that. From my immigration law perspective, I when you asked the question, it made me think of there are some process type issues that present challenges to employers bringing in international talent. And that, of course, is the timeline it takes to get the immigration approval once you've found the individual and you've sold them on coming to Halifax, Nova Scotia to work for your company. And many of some of the timeline issues have been streamlined and facilitated over the years, but it's really, really important for employers and the international talent they're wanting to bring to Canada to understand the various steps in the process of getting the necessary immigration approvals. Depending on where the person's coming from, what type of immigration authorization or work permit or permanent residence process fits for their particular situation, it can be a matter of weeks or it can be a matter of several months from the time they've signed the employment agreement and then actually come to Canada. And that process has been elongated during COVID, of course, because for all intents and purposes, our borders are closed. But I wanted to make mention of that because that's something really important to consider. And it's one of the reasons why Canada and Atlantic Canada can sometimes not be as competitive as other countries. So if you have somebody you found the ideal candidate and it's going to take months to do complete the necessary recruitment that's required and to get the appropriate LMIA if it's required or work permit approval. And then many times the individual doesn't want to give notice to their current employer until the immigration decision has been sealed in. So that's some of the timeline we see that elongates the process. So I wanted to mention this because the number one question I get when I'm speaking to an employer who wants to bring somebody to Canada is, how long is this going to take? Because we want them here next week or next month.
Yeah. Very true. Thanks so much, Andrea. And actually, that's a great segue into the next question. I do see some questions coming in from our audience. We'll get to those in just a minute. But first, I did want to draw Jennifer Lesperance into the conversation here. Across the marine industry, there's been a demand for skilled and semi-skilled workers, from food processing roles to skilled trades, and then, of course, to the HQPs, or highly qualified personnel, that we were just speaking of. And I recently read a press release in the Cape Breton Post that talked about the regional and provincial nominee programs. The article was also featured in the Chronicle Herald. It stated that immigration will continue to be an accelerator of our economic recovery. So Jennifer, could you just tell us a bit more about this immigration strategy and about programs and other supports that are available at the provincial level that maybe could help to speed up some of that process that Andrea was talking about?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. I can give a quick touch base, and of course, we could be here all day if we were just talking about immigration. But we're happy to help further after the call as well. But of course, immigration is a priority for the province. It remains a priority for Nova Scotia. Even in these times of COVID, we do recognize that it will be part of the economic recovery. And as a province, we have a goal of inclusive economic growth, and part of that strategy in reaching inclusive economic growth is population growth and employment attachment. So these two have to go hand in hand. Through immigration, we're filling skilled labor gaps by recruiting people who have the skills that we do need in the labor force. And immigration's changing the fabric of the province. So it's increasing diversity in our workplaces and our communities. And immigrants are bringing new ideas, innovation, and global perspective that's beneficial to everyone. So I can tell by the people on this panel that they definitely appreciate the diverse skill set and diverse cultures and background and experience and knowledge that newcomers can bring to any community and any workforce. As Andrea touched on, immigration is shared jurisdiction between Canada, the federal governments, and provincial governments. However, the federal government does have that lion's share of authority. So in terms of granting approvals for work permits for permanent residency, that does rest with the federal government. And while the federal government has a variety of immigration pathways, our office here at Nova Scotia Office of Immigration has very innovative selection programs. So we have several streams through our provincial nominee program, as well as the Atlantic Immigration Pilot, which is a pilot program, hopefully soon to be a permanent program, that's unique to the Atlantic provinces. And it's addressing our labor and economic needs throughout the province. And in fact, most immigrants to the province do come through Nova Scotia selection programs. And more employers are using immigration to help fill their persistent labor needs. Our office can also help with that. So we have an employer support team who can help navigate the system. And we work with a variety of stakeholders, other government departments, employers, sectors, community development partners to identify the labor needs in the province and help to fill those. We also organize strategic and we participate in as well existing international recruitment events to promote opportunities to live and work in the province. And we're always interested in speaking to employers about where employers may already know that some of those skills that are required in their workplace. So if they know that there's a pool of talent in a particular market, we're happy to work with employers to see how we can recruit those skilled workers to fill those particular gaps. And of course, as Jordan really talked about quite eloquently, recruitment's only part of the solution. Retention is just as important. So our office provides almost $6.5 million in settlement funding to organizations to help support newcomers to settle and integrate into communities. And we also recognize, as everyone does on the panel, that immigration is not just government's responsibility, but we need to work with our community partners, with our employers, local chambers of commerce, and make sure that Nova Scotia is not only attracting newcomers to the province, but also supporting them to build their lives here. Happy to touch on any other questions that you have.
Thanks, Jennifer. Actually, a few questions have come up, and one I wanted to throw it to you, or probably to Andrea as well. It comes from Ben C, and it says, how would one go about competing against locals for the same job? And what do you think would give an international graduate the edge over a local graduate when applying for a job?
I'm happy to touch on that.
Thank you.
So through our programs, we do need to show that employers have done recruitment. So they need to recruit for positions in at least 3 different places for a month. One of those places that they recruit needs to be national in scope. And it does need to show that they've done their diligence in recruiting, that there's no other Canadian permanent resident or citizen that can fulfill that job. So we recruit local first. But we know that employers are often having difficulty filling those hard to fill positions, and that's when we're able to go to the international candidate. When it comes to international graduates, often they are on an open work permit. So sometimes if they're able to start that job, that does suffice the recruitment requirement. So if they're already here working on a work permit, whether you're an international grad or on a different type of work permit, that can help. But if you're recruiting overseas, you do need to show that you've looked locally first.
Okay, great, thank you. Andrea, did you want to add something to that?
Sure. I will just add to say that as a lawyer, when we're helping our clients, we always look for the easiest and most straightforward path for an immigration solution. So as Jennifer suggested, there is an exemption to the recruitment requirement, and that is if an individual is already in Canada working on an LMIA exempt work permit or even an LMIA based work permit. So there are situations where recruitment isn't necessary. And then I'm not sure the question that has been posed, it sounds to me like the international graduate may have studied in the UK, but just to echo Jennifer's point, international graduates who've come to Canada, completed a program, a post-secondary program in Canada at a designated learning institute, if they meet the requirements, they are eligible for this post-graduation work permit. And it's a wonderful pathway. It's a wonderful strategy and pathway for an individual who wants to come to Canada in the long term. When I started in this business, there wasn't such a thing as a post-graduation work permit. So there was no smooth transition to become a permanent resident. But basically, if you study in Canada and you do so full time and you complete your program, you then are entitled to a post-graduation work permit. And the intention is that during that time, you'll gain valuable Canadian work experience or Nova Scotia work experience that then helps you to qualify for permanent residence. And that's because Canada's immigration policy and strategy these days, and Nova Scotia's as well, is really to focus on those individuals who've already come here and have work experience, or they've studied here because they've already settled. They've demonstrated they can settle and integrate well. So it's really a success for everyone that way.
Okay, thanks, Andrea. That's really helpful information, especially for those of us who take on international students as interns and in co-op positions. But once we've had a chance to work with them, we really want to find ways that we can keep them. So that's great information. And actually, that's again another great segue into our next question here with James. Here at Cove, we just completed an internship pilot, and we did have 4 international students, all top talent who we are hoping can stay in Canada once they complete their studies. And similarly, at Ultra Electronics, they've shown a tremendous commitment to developing young talent. And James, I know that you provide internships for dozens of engineers and technicians each year. And as an employer, maybe you could describe some of the hurdles that you've encountered in trying to retain international young talent and some of the lessons that you've learned that can help facilitate that process, and maybe share any advice that you have for other employers looking to do so.
Yeah, thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. I don't think we have a whole lot of great kind of magic solutions, because I think one of the challenges we face is the same as what I think everybody's described, which is I think partially perceived and partially reality, which is the length of the process and the I guess I'll call it cumbersomeness of the process to bring in an international candidate. I think in some cases that scares people off a little bit to say, like there is a lot of work that would need to go into bringing in international candidates. And so I think, some, I guess, advice or any assistance that would be available is always very much appreciated. We've had the opportunity to meet with the province and understand some of the programs that are available. And I think that's maybe maybe some of the advice for folks as well is there are programs and supports that are available when you are looking at international candidates that can really help with the process, as well as law firms that specialize in this area, because it is a complex process to go through, and there's a fair bit of work, and it does take time. So I think that's part of the other I guess advice that we would have is that when you are looking for a specialized candidate, we hire PhDs in acoustic engineering. There aren't a whole bunch of those out there, and build in that time, because if you want to hire that person next month, that is not going to, you're not going to be able to facilitate an international candidate. And so you want to make sure that you build in that time and that availability. So that comes down to workforce planning and making sure that you've got that built into your process. The other aspect that we do find challenging is similar to what Jordan was talking about, was around security clearances. And so here in our facility, we require 2 levels of security clearance reliability, which is a 5-year background check, and NATO secret, which is a 10-year background check. And in a lot of cases, if someone hasn't lived in Canada for that 5 or 10 years, the process can take an extended period of time. And even some of that, exchange with other NATO countries, that can be a time-consuming process as well. We've had people who come to us from the UK who had top secret clearance in the UK, and it's taken over a year to get their secret clearance here in Canada. And it's just, COVID is definitely an aspect that has caused some challenges. The federal government's Public Works and Government Services Canada got backed up with when COVID happened, and we're still working our way through that. But that has been another one of our challenges, is around how do you bring in a candidate as quickly as possible, still navigating all the security clearance requirements. So.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's timing and it's compliance, right? The 2 key areas that Andrea spoke to as well. Ulash, did you want to jump in?
Oh yeah, I may actually touch a couple of points that have been raised by Andrea and Jordan. First, I'd like to mention that when I advertised a position in Mercams last year, I received dozens of qualified applications from individuals who were already residing in the United States. But just like Andrea suggested, and Jordan suggested, I didn't know how long it would take to go through the recruitment process, because of the fact that we had to advertise that position for a couple of months, I think, and make sure that there were no local qualified candidates. And also, as a person who went through the school system in both North America and on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, I can actually attest to similarities between the Canadian university system and American university system. And if, for instance, the Canadian experience could be expanded to North American experience, and if a fast track could have been provided to those individuals, those qualified individuals who already went to school in the US and want to come to Canada to work, I think we could have really addressed one of the shortcomings that Jennifer mentioned. So that might be one idea that I might propose for future immigration regulations. And apart from that, in my own case, Dalhousie University had to keep that position advertised for, I think, 2 months or 3 months. And then finally, they could have gone forward with my application. So I just thought that I would mention that.
Did one of the panelists want to comment or respond to anything? Not yet. Okay. I would like to open up another question here from the audience. There was one from Drummer Boy 97 who asked, what are the benefits of the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program? Is it an easier path towards permanent residency?
I can speak to that.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer.
There's no real easy answer, unfortunately. So when you say easier pathway to permanent residency, I can say that in comparison to the provincial nominee program, the skilled worker stream, once you apply for permanent residency, it's 18 to 24 months at the federal side for your permanent residency. With the Atlantic Immigration Pilot Program, it's about 6 months to permanent residency. So in that sense, yes, it's quicker. However, in terms of work permit processing, previously the provincial nominee program would have had a quicker work permit processing. In the provincial nominee program, we also have something called the experience stream. So if you've gained a year's worth of experience here in Nova Scotia, you can go through the federal express entry system, and then that permanent residency time is also 6 months. There's lots of things to consider. So that's why we do have that employer support team, and even, there's lots of people to answer the phone here at immigration if there are specific questions, because each individual really has different considerations to take into account to see what is the best pathway for them. We've also been saying in our office, we have a great amount of Atlantic Immigration Pilot applications right now. And if you're an individual who's not in Canada and not in one of our priority sectors, such as healthcare, it may take up to 4 to 5 months just to get through our provincial office. Now, if you go through our skilled worker stream in the provincial nominee program, it's likely not going to take more than 4 weeks. So, and those processing times change depending on demand and depending on the amount of processing space we have in our office and what the priorities are in our workforce at the time. So again, each individual is quite a different situation.
Okay, I guess the answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jennifer. I'd like to pull Dr. Brunels into the conversation here and talk a bit more about the HQPs and the international talent that we're actively recruiting. At MEOPAR, the Marine Environmental Observation, Prediction and Response Network, they have quite a significant talent management strategy, and it focuses on developing both domestic and also international talent, and especially in the HQP area. Brent, could you tell us a little bit about MEOPAR's international recruitment and retention strategy, how it works, the benefits that you've seen in terms of knowledge transfer and workforce development, and any advice that you could share for employers who are hoping to recruit and retain HQPs internationally?
Yeah, for sure. So first of all, I was
I think you're...
Oh, I'm still muted? Am I muted? No.
No, you're good now.
Okay, good.
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah, so I wanted to say, first of all, I was sort of struck by how different our recruitment looks like in academia compared to some of what we've been hearing from the other panelists. And I think that gets to the point that, in academia, we're not necessarily looking for someone who's already highly trained with really specific expertise. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring in bright people that we can train, that we can turn into highly qualified personnel, and then hopefully hand off to somebody like Jordan or Ulash or James or something like that. So I think our perspective is a little bit different, but it doesn't mean that we don't still have challenges for recruiting a diverse workforce, or like a diverse workforce within academia. So we know, for example, that our diversity statistics within oceanography or earth sciences more generally are not great, and so we've been talking about that a lot in academia and how we can sort of resolve that. And I think, for one of the things that I've sort of been talking with quite a bit with my grad students right now is that I think it's important in the academic settings that our research labs really look like places where people from different backgrounds can fit in, and it looks like a place that has the supports that are necessary for someone traveling from an international location. When they join your group, they can see that there are going to be supports in place for them to succeed. And so if we think, for example, about an international student that's coming to Canada, we have fewer barriers than like what Jordan and Andrea are talking about. I think, often we can get students in on a student visa or something like that. So the bureaucracy is a little bit simpler, but there's still a lot for those students to overcome. They're still traveling a long distance. They're probably going to end up in a studentship that isn't paid particularly well. So, we need to have these supports in place to help them out. And so within MEOPAR, we have lots of different ways to do that. We have a mentoring program. We have our annual training meeting. We host various different events throughout the year, like webinars. We focus some of our webinars on diversity issues like that. And then we try to make sure that we have really inclusive policies in place. And so like one, for example, that's not perfectly relevant to the current discussion is we always try to make sure we have childcare available at our annual science meeting. This makes it easier for young scientists to participate. For international students within the network, we try to make sure we can offer them a little bit higher stipend, to deal with the higher costs that they encounter. So we try to put all of these supports in place. And I think that's a really important thing, is that for us, is that when we're recruiting those international students, that they can see that those supports exist and that it's a place where they'll be welcomed and, you know, developed more fully. And then I think just to sort of conclude as well, you know, then the last part of our job is to hand those students off to some of the industries that are represented on the panel here. And I just wanted to get back to a point that Ulash made very, very early on about networking and attending conferences and stuff like that. And that's something that we really focus on in Meopar. So it is, you know, primarily an academic network, but we have partners from all different industries as well. And what we would normally be doing at this time of year is hosting a big in-person meeting where we'd be bringing all of those students together with our industry partners so that they can meet each other and discuss and hopefully have those fruitful partnerships that Ulash was just describing earlier. We have to do it virtually this year, but that's sort of, you know, a general overview of how we try to do those things and, you know, bring in those students, develop them, and then hopefully hand them off to the industries that need them. So I'll stop there, but that's sort of gives you an overview of it.
Great, thanks, Brent. And in terms of retention, Brent, for the ones who stay or the students who endure or stay beyond the scope of their studies, is there one or two things that they say that really made the difference, that's why they stayed or why they didn't?
Yeah, good question. So I'm still relatively young in my career. I haven't had a lot of students that have made it, endure it, as you say. But I think that so there, as other panelists have described, there are some better opportunities for students that have graduated. I've got a student who just finished, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think he's allowed to stay in Canada on a work permit for at least some period of time, which is great. So I think, you know, if we can, when we've got those these networks established, if we've got students that have had experience working with various industries, then hopefully that handoff goes a little bit better. But I'm interested to learn about this too, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Andrea, I think we've talked a lot already about some of the challenges, and maybe you could shed some light on some others. You know, I think we're all pretty clear on you know, the benefits of hiring newcomers to Canada and international talent. You know, they bring new perspectives. They can accelerate the transfer of knowledge and facilitate the coordination of teams with really complex skill sets versus, you know, trying to cultivate that slowly in-house. So, you know, a lot of benefits and a lot of advantages, but at the same time, you know, as we've heard already today, often employers are reluctant to look at international students or in international pools because they believe that process is going to be expensive or fraught with challenges. So you've mentioned already some of the challenges that you've heard. What are some other challenging areas where employers or employees get stuck or confused? And what other advice do you have for them to consider when they're looking to recruit or retain immigrants or international talent?
Sure, thanks, Sherry. There are so many challenges, but let me just focus on a few. The first one I'll mention, just at a very high level, and I already alluded to this, but certainly during the pandemic, there's an entirely additional layer of rules imposed upon bringing people to Canada from outside of the country, and those are the travel restrictions. So yes, Canada's borders are technically closed, and there is a specific set of rules that applies to entry to Canada from the US, and then another set of rules that applies to entry to Canada from outside of the US. And you know, when these restrictions were first imposed in March, I think we all many of us optimistically thought that we would be dealing with them for a month or so. And every month or so, the government extends them. And I think this is certainly going to be our new normal for a long time. And it's actually, you know, kind of anxiety provoking for an immigration lawyer to be, you know, when Canada's borders are closed. But let me assure you, there are a lot of exceptions. There are a lot of ways to get people into the country, particularly the border closure between Canada and the US, the for an asymptomatic person, they can enter the country as long as they are not coming for an optional or a discretionary purpose. Now, I won't go into that any further because there's all sorts of ways in which that's interpreted, and sometimes it comes right down to the subjectivity of the officer adjudicating a particular case at the border. For those who are trying to enter Canada from outside of the country, so it is possible in some cases for employers to hire and bring to Canada individuals from internationally who are overseas, particularly if they are working in what's been defined as essential services. So I just wanted to I wanted to mention that, that's an extra layer, it's a hurdle, but my teams are spending a lot of time helping to navigate those hurdles for individuals. The other thing I would say, broadly speaking, is understanding the process. Is a hurdle for both employers and employees often. And so I would say often employers end up recruiting international talent when they didn't necessarily intend to. So you can put a job ad up on the job bank or up on Career Beacon intending to recruit domestically and have somebody apply internationally, and you're not even going to necessarily know that they're not a Canadian or a permanent resident. You may know that they live outside of Canada based on their address. But if that person is the star candidate that you want to bring, and you didn't intend to initially hire internationally, you're going to be at a disadvantage already, and that you may need to go back and do recruitment because sometimes the recruitment rules aren't always intuitive. The province is a little bit more flexible and understanding, I'll say, than when you're dealing with Service Canada on an LMIA application. So just the rules are complex. They're not rocket science. I always tell people you don't necessarily need someone like me or one of my colleagues to guide you through the process, particularly if you've done it before. But there's a lot of I's to dot, a lot of T's to cross, and I would recommend that any employer really work hard to try and understand the entire process. If they don't have the benefit of Immigration Counsel, there's resources, there's reading, there's our wonderful colleagues at the province who actually answer the phone, which is a very nice alternative to federal immigration officers. It's all, a number of years ago, there were numbers where we could actually get people to pick up the phone. That doesn't happen very often these days. So in terms of understanding the process, there's subtle things that can be really impactful. For example, it's important to always make sure that a foreign worker that you are employing has status and remains in status even when they are transitioning from being a temporary resident, so somebody on a work permit, to a permanent resident of Canada. And there's this lovely status called implied status, so that if you do everything you're supposed to, you can work after your work permit expires until you get your new status. But there's a lot of misconceptions about that. And so, for example, I talk to a lot of employers who say, yeah, we've hired this person and their work permit expired, but they've applied for permanent residence. So they've told us they have implied status, and that's incorrect. So there's subtle things like that in both employers and employees need to be aware of, because there are significant consequences for non-compliance with Canada's immigration rules. For example, it's always been illegal to employ somebody without proper status, but historically, unless you did something really egregious as an employer, you didn't get in trouble. But now there are, I call them immigration audits. That's not what they're called, but that's what they are. And they're commonplace. If employers who bring foreign workers to Canada are subject to them all the time. It slowed down a little bit during the pandemic, but about 25% of all cases that are ultimately audited. And these days there are large administrative penalties that can be levied against non-compliant employers, even those who do it not intentionally. And in addition, for the more serious infractions, there are bans on employing foreign nationals. So you can be banned for 2, 5, or 10 years, or indefinitely. So and there are lists of non-compliant employers. So there's a huge potential reputational risk if you don't get it right. And I mean, you can look at those lists, and there are employers in Nova Scotia who are on it currently. The other thing that I did want to mention, and I thought would be very important to flag today, since we're in Nova Scotia and we're talking about Canada's oceans industry with a primary. Well, I don't know where the audience members are, but I assume there's a lot of Nova Scotian people in Nova Scotia who are listening in today. So, as Jennifer said, there are both the federal government and the provincial government have their hand in regulating immigration. And so that means there are both federal and provincial rules that regulate the employment of foreign workers. And Nova Scotia, rightly so, a number of years ago, beefed up its labor standards protections, specifically with foreign workers in mind. The result was a little bit cumbersome, and so employers are regulated in their employment of foreign workers, as are recruiters. And so my caveat and my warning and my caution is to all employers: if you want to use a recruiter to hire foreign workers to come to Canada, to work in Nova Scotia. So not all provinces have these rules. There's a few more who are coming online. Manitoba has a very similar rule, and BC just introduced a rule. But Nova Scotia's rule is most robust, so that there are some exceptions, but it's illegal to use a recruiter to help you find foreign nationals for employment in Nova Scotia unless they are licensed. And the problem with the rule is that to be a licensed recruiter, on the list of Nova Scotia licensed recruiters, you have to be either an immigration lawyer like me or a licensed immigration consultant. So that's all well and good. There is a list, but it's not individuals like me who necessarily excel at recruiting foreign talent. It might be more intuitive for you to use a search firm or an engineering recruitment firm. And so even if you were to use a firm that you would normally use to help you find talent in Canada, if that firm happens to find a foreign national for you, unless that individual or the position meets with an exemption, you've broken the law, and there are significant consequences of it. So I flag that. It's a bit pesky. When it initially came out, there were some. Thankfully, we worked very hard with the province, and some changes were implemented so that if you are solely looking for managerial or professional, looking to fill managerial or professional positions from outside of Canada, and you do not recruit internationally for semi-skilled or high-skilled roles, then you're exempt and you can use international search firms, and they're not subject to these rules. So that
wow,
things I wanted to highlight today.
Thanks, Andrea. So it sounds like it's difficult, especially in light of COVID, but not impossible. And really, it's about being informed, about having enough time, and making sure that you're compliant. So, thank you very much, Andrea. I do want to open things up to the audience again. We have a question coming from, and I'm sorry if I mispronounce your name. I think it's Kailani Tepper. That says, I've encountered many students that are interested in starting their own business, but find the obstacles of the International Graduate Entrepreneurship Program much higher. Can any of you speak to why that might be? Who would like to take that question on? Jennifer?
I think that's me again. Hi. So we do have two business streams under the Provincial Nominee Program. We have the Entrepreneur Program and then the International Graduate Entrepreneur Program. And she's right. There are a lot of checks and balances in place to make sure that if an international student is starting a business, that they are able to run it for a year, get an audit at the end, and make sure that they can be viable into the future. So we look pretty closely at retention. So if someone is starting a new job in an occupation that's very much in demand in the province, there's a higher likelihood of retention than if you're starting your own business and you're entirely reliant on a brand new business. And we know new businesses sometimes have difficulty. So we've put a few more checks and balances in there that can make it difficult. However, we've also done a lot of engagement with universities, with Edunova, with others, and we have recently made some changes to the program that hopefully will make it a little bit easier. One is that now the international graduate does not need to be the sole owner. So they can be a 1/3 shareholder of the company and still be eligible for the program. So they can get a couple of partners, and hopefully that'll help the success of the business as well, and then the success of their nomination. The other part that we heard was a barrier was the audit at the end. So they needed an audit and a special purpose report. And for a brand new business that's been operating for a year, that can be cost prohibitive. So we've changed the audit requirement to a review engagement. So it's a lower type of an audit that still provides us an assurance that this is a business that can be viable into the future, but it's much less of a cost to the newcomer. So hopefully those things will help a bit, but she is right that we have heard from others that other immigration pathways can be easier if you're able to find a job and get that full-time, permanent, year-round employment opportunity, and then immigrate that way. So again, there's different options.
Great, thanks, Jennifer. I'm just looking at the time, and as usual, our time together just goes so quickly. And I'm sorry, there are other questions here from the audience that we won't have a chance to get to. In our last few minutes together, I do want to throw out a final question, and if anyone wants to just say a final word. And I guess my question is, from your own perspective, from your business, from your area of expertise, what is still one or more of the real, practical, and enduring challenges that still need to be addressed to make it easier for employers to recruit and retain international talent? Who'd like to start us off there with a final thought?
I'm happy to.
Thanks, Jordan.
Others, yeah. I mean, I think the one thing, and it's been mentioned a couple of times by some of the panelists, that we probably find the most challenging is the timelines in processing different parts of the immigration process. That would certainly be the biggest challenge I think that we face in terms of something that could be I think streamlined or improved in the future. And that's notwithstanding fantastic people like Jennifer and her group, who I think in the province work really well to assist employers. But certainly on the federal level, I know we sometimes are challenged around some of the timelines, and certainly COVID hasn't been a help to employers in that regard. So I think if anything, that would be the one area that I think would be very helpful for employers across the board in moving things along faster.
I'll just chime in to add on to what Jordan has said. Of course, COVID has been very frustrating for prospective immigrants and employers because much of the federal processing network shut down for safety reasons. But we're seeing that it's back, and IRCC is processing applications more or less these days. But the silver lining of COVID is that IRCC has demonstrated more flexibility than we've ever seen. Not initially, but there have been some temporary public policies that have been introduced that I hope become permanent public policies. For example, if a foreign national wants to change their job, usually, unless they're on an open work permit, they need a new work permit with new terms and conditions. And the process for doing that has, the processing times ebb and flow throughout the year. They're never quick. They're, usually anywhere from 60 days to 6 months. These days, they're closer to 6 months is the processing time. But under this, there is a new temporary policy, and I think it's really been introduced to help people who are out of a job and now have found a new opportunity. But there's a way for them there's a way for us to request that they receive an email authorization within 10 business days that allows them to move into and begin working in their new position until their work permit is actually adjudicated in the 5 or 6 months that it's going to take. So that's an excellent development. We've also seen other flexibility introduced in terms of whether you need to go outside of Canada and re-enter to get your immigration document or approval. So I really hope that we see more of that and that these temporary policies become permanent policies.
Great, thank you, Andrea. And any other final comments before we say goodbye? I don't see hands coming up. Thank you, everyone. I do want to thank all of our guests for their time today, for sharing their expertise and their perspectives with us. A huge thank you, of course, goes out to the Cove team, who's always behind the scenes making all this happen and making sure our technology always works. Thank you, of course, to our co-sponsors, OTC&S. They're always really supportive of our programs and here at Cove and with the Cove Workforce Initiative. I do want to take a moment just to say all the best to Gordon Gale from OTC&S, who will be shifting from Canada to Scotland to assume the role of Director of International Business Development. So good luck with that, Gordon. Thanks, of course, to all of our viewers here today for your questions. I'm sorry we didn't have time to get to them. We always need more time, but it's been a great conversation. Please do join us on November 4th for our next Changing Tides panel, where Vice Admiral Jim King will lead a panel discussion focusing on engaging senior and older talent in the blue economy. But until then, stay well, stay safe, and stay dry.